there. Go ahead, take it away.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kim, and thanks everyone for joining today. Kim and I have spent a lot of time on webinars together as well. Certainly think about the process that you did last year and just looking at those poll results. And ACA was difficult in 2015. No matter what, it was difficult. It was new. And so what we want to do is talk about how to take painful process and, golly, at a minimum, make it less painful, hopefully make it awesome for you. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about several components of the ACA as we go through this, and then we're going to do a demonstration. So I'm going to start within some PowerPoint slides here. And we're going to do, first we're going to take a look at the agenda. We'll do a quick introduction about integrity data if you're not familiar with this. We're going to do a quick recap of the ACA Employer Mandate. A lot of you are already familiar with that, but that's just going to help us get some terminology in place that we'll use throughout the webinar. We'll talk about also what you did for ACA compliance in 2015. We touched on that a little bit in the poll questions, but we're going to talk through that in a little bit more detail. We're going to talk about specific weaknesses of Dynamics GP as it relates to ACA compliance and talk about your risk areas associated with that. We're going to talk about the advantages of using a complete ACA solution for your compliance efforts and reporting requirements with the IRS. Of course, we're going to do a demonstration of our solution that we provide through the Dynamics GP channel and through InterDyn BMI. And of course, as Kim mentioned, at the end we'll have time for questions and answers. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into the introduction. If you're not familiar with us, we've been around for 20 years. As a matter of fact, as we were reminiscing last month about being in business for 20 years, our founder and CEO was talking about how doing some Great Plains development work for BMI. BMI was one of our first partner organizations that we worked with. And so it's hard to believe that it's been 20 years. I've been here for almost 17 of those 20 years. And in that time frame, we've helped more than 8,000 organizations worldwide streamline their business processes in the area of payroll and human resources. And we've done that in a variety of ways. A lot of that's been in the Dynamics GP channel. We've done that in some other areas as well. But within Dynamics GP, we've added in some features. There's some core features in the payroll module that were originally authored by Integrity Data. We've got an OEM license agreement for some features that are available. Of course, providing products and services to customers that utilize Dynamics GP. So we've been a Dynamics GP shop for a long time, as starting to venture outside of that a little bit, especially with the Affordable Care Act compliance, just because there's so many employers out there that need those capabilities. But that's really been our home. Related specifically to ACA, we've been involved with that since 2012, so it's been 4.5 years. Some say it feels like 4.5 minutes, but 4.5 minutes underwater, because it hasn't been easy. And so what we try to do is take what we've learned over that period of time and in all the employers that we've worked with in that 4.5 years and really try to streamline and learn and develop great technology and great processes and great educational components that will help employers that we work with. All right, let's talk about the ACA Employer Mandate. Employer Mandate applies to every applicable large employer, and an applicable large employer is an employer that has 50 or more full-time equivalents. So that's full-time employees that you've traditionally thought about. That's part-time employees that work more than 130 hours per month, and that's also takes into consideration part-time employees that don't work 130 hours per month, but there's a divisor there, that number's 120, where you take all those part-time hours, divide by 120, and that produces an additional FTE equivalent. So it's a unique calculation, but it's important because that determines whether or not you need to be in compliance with the mandate. Also, that FTE count crosses employer lines. So if you have multiple individual employers or EINs that are commonly controlled or affiliated, then those all have to be counted together. For example, in our organization here in Integrity Data, the owner of this company owns a couple of other organizations as well. And so those all have to be combined for purposes of determining whether or not we're an ALE. All right, so once you get past that and you make that determination, if you're an ALE for 2016, you need to be in compliance in 2017. This is some additional information related to definitions of commonly controlled or affiliated companies. So if you'd like to read more on that, you can certainly do so. But what you need to do if you're an ALE is that you need to do two things. One is comply with the coverage mandate, and that is really the heart of the employer mandate, which is making sure that you're offering affordable coverage to eligible employees. Eligible employees are going to include those full-time employees as we've traditionally thought about them. They're set up in your payroll system as full-time employees, but also needs to apply to part-time employees, or otherwise known as variable hour employees, that meet certain criteria or work a certain number of hours. And that's traditionally done through the testing methods or the eligibility methods, the monthly measurement method, and the look-back measurement method. Most employers with part-time employees are using the look-back measurement method, which simply, stated simply, is if an employee averages 130 hours of service per month over the course of that look-back period, which is typically 12 months, then you need to offer that employee health insurance. Then you've got the reporting requirements. So the reporting requirements, think of as really your report card, going to the IRS to say, hey, here's all of my full-time employees and I've offered them coverage. So there's the Form 1095-C that goes to an employee that says you were a full-time employee and offered you coverage in these particular months. And the Form 1094-C, which is a summary document that goes to the IRS along with copies of those 1095-Cs. And so that's your reporting requirements, and if you don't do that, you will see penalties associated with that also. So those are two of the requirements that we're going to talk about. And like I just mentioned, if you are not in compliance with those efforts, with those requirements, then you will be penalized by the IRS. So there's penalties associated with not offering coverage to employees. There's penalties associated with not offering employees coverage that is affordable. And there's penalties associated with not meeting your filing requirements with the Internal Revenue Service. So 3 ways to get dinged, if you will, by the IRS when it comes to ACA compliance. The reason we point this out is that you really have to be on your toes, and I think when we get into one of the slides down the way here a little bit, I want to talk more about your activities and how you spread that load as far as activities for compliance throughout the year. What did you do for compliance in 2015? And this relates back to that poll question. Did you do nothing? Did you use Dynamics GP, have to use spreadsheets, manually update codes on 1095-Cs, those ACA codes, or enter them in for every employee for every month, or try to keep track of them? Did you have to manually interact with each individual employee as it relates to ACA compliance? Did you have to mess with system dates in the system to get an accurate 1095-C? And the question most commonly answered in the affirmative, did you contribute to the good old swear jar? And that's just to point out and to demonstrate how frustrating this process was because it was new, and not to repeat that process because it's not new anymore, but yet you might still have a cruddy process in place which is going to continue to take contributions from your pocket and put them in the swear jar. So what we want to do is start to point out how this process can become easier. You're a little bit more familiar with it now, so it's naturally going to be a little bit easier in 2016, but let's take that several steps further and reduce some of the manual workload that's involved with ACA compliance. If you're looking at Dynamics GP, and obviously as I mentioned, Dynamics GP is our heritage, so we're certainly not here to throw stones at Dynamics GP, but we are going to expose potential risk areas that may be involved if you're utilizing Dynamics GP as your primary compliance system for the Affordable Care Act. So here are some reasons why, or here's some weaknesses associated with Dynamics GP. It does not support the look-back eligibility method, which is most commonly used for or with employers that have variable hour employees. It doesn't support consolidated reporting requirements if you have multiple EINs. does not have the ability to e-file the 1094-C with the IRS, which is required if you have more than 250 eligible employees. It produces an incomplete 1094-C because it cannot do this, what we call the ALE calculation, which is sections 2 and 3 of the 1095-C. It does not have any eligibility forecasting or alerts. And if you think about that, when an employee becomes eligible for an offer of coverage, you've really got to be on top of that. Because if not, you could start to be penalized for each incremental month that you don't offer coverage to that employee. And so it's important to have a system that's proactive, that's going to help you understand ahead of time when those employees are becoming eligible. In Dynamics GP, manual interaction is required for each employee. And as I just mentioned a minute ago, that shouldn't be required. You must enroll employees in a benefit so that the code gets assigned to them, even if they're not really enrolling in that benefit. So it's confusing and it's definitely unnecessary. There's no distinction between employment type and ACA status, and so in Dynamics, in our ACA world, you can have an employment type of part-time, but an ACA status of full-time, and Dynamics GP doesn't really do a good job of distinguishing those. There's no ALE determination capability, and again, that's the same data used on the 1094-C. And related to Dynamics GP, there's no planned ACA features for 2016 related to addressing these particular weaknesses. Dynamics GP is going to have, there are a couple of new ACA codes, the 1J and the 1K, that will need to be used for 2016 reporting. Those Dynamics or Microsoft will make those available in Dynamics GP, but they're not going to address any of these other scenarios that we've pointed out. Certainly, and I always preface this or kind of clarify this with, if you're a smaller employer, let's say that you've got 65 FTEs, they're all full-time, they're all enrolled in coverage, you have very little turnover, you can probably use Dynamics GP to put in the data and generate the forms for you. If you have, my rule of thumb is if you have over 100 employees and if you have any number of part-time employees, then you're really exposing yourself to potential risk and of course penalties associated with that if you're using Dynamics GP. Certainly if you have multiple EINs, if you have more than 250 eligible employees, by all means you should be utilizing a more comprehensive ACA solution to help you stay compliant. The price tag is too high associated with the penalties to not do something like that. All right. So what's your plan for 2016 compliance and reporting? As we look at the efforts required to stay compliant throughout 2016 and throughout every other year, it really involves ongoing processes throughout the year. For example, continuously you must track every employee's hours of service. On a monthly basis you must identify which employees are becoming eligible. Those could be full-time employees coming to the end of a waiting period, and those could also be part-time employees that are coming to the end of what's known as their initial measurement period. You also need to be monitoring affordability and things like that also. Now on an annual basis, of course, at the end of the year, you must determine your ALE status to know whether or not you need to comply next year, provide Form 1095-C to the employees, and submit the forms into the IRS. Now what I've seen in the last 2 years is that most employers are sort of, and not all, but too many is probably the best way to say it, are pushing off their ACA efforts until this annual process. Oh, okay, it's end of the year, I guess we'll start thinking about ACA and compliance and 1095-Cs. And if you have any number of part-time employees, that's very dangerous. The way that the way that our product sets up and the way that it's really intended to be used, and the way that you should really comply with the Affordable Care Act is that you're doing a little bit more work throughout the year. We're making that very efficient. So monthly, you're tracking the hours, doing that through your payroll system, determining eligibility and so on, and being proactive. And then when you get to the end of the year, it's really just printing forms. So most of your work effort should really be shifted back throughout the year and spread out versus trying to cram it all in at the end of the year. This should really be another poll question. How many of you have time for additional tasks or vacation in January? None, because you've got year-end, you've got new benefit season typically. You've got W-2s to get done, 1099s and all that stuff. So you don't really have a lot of time to proactively manage your ACA compliance. You probably have very little time to print forms. And so what we want to do is start to help employers manage that process more proactively throughout the year so that it's easy in January, as I say, get all that stuff done, and February 1st, head to Cancun. Okay, that's my motto. I think it's happened twice in the 6 years I've been saying it, so I'm trying to practice a little bit more of what I'm preaching here. But anyway, so that's kind of the way that I want you to start thinking about that, because that's really going to fit in with how we configured the system and some of the reports that come in with it as well. All right, now here's obviously going to tie into that. January 31st, you must have the 1095-Cs out to all of your eligible employees. If you have less than 250 eligible employees, you can send your 1094-C on paper to the IRS. If you have more than 250, you are required to e-file with the Internal Revenue Service, and we'll show you how to do that utilizing our system as well. ACA changes for 2016 that are coming up. Most transitional relief is gone for 2016 compliance, so, and I realize a little bit of this is in retrospect, and the fact that if you haven't done some of these things yet, you could already be in a little bit of trouble, but know that there's a little transitional relief that was available in 2015 that would carry over to 2016. Back to the original filing deadlines that we just mentioned, there are some new codes related to conditional offers. That's the 1J and the 1K. If you want more information on that, stay tuned to our blog post. We'll be publishing some additional information related to those. And there are some minor form changes on the 1095-C. Okay, just to point out some changes there for 2016. New codes are still in draft along with the 1095-C, so those have not yet been finalized. So let's talk about the preferred approach now, which is utilizing a comprehensive ACA solution and what that should look like. First of all, it should be a proactive versus a reactive system. So it should be something that's alerting you to compliance risks and eligibility throughout the year. It should be supported by an ACA knowledgeable team, be responsive to IRS guideline changes around ACA. It should have wizard-driven configuration. It does not require manual tracking, and I'm going to say this probably 6 more times. There's no reason why you should have to manually interact with each individual employee from an ACA perspective. A comprehensive ACA solution should be a hosted solution. And that might make some of you feel a little bit uncomfortable, because in the Dynamics GP world, we're used to a lot of things being contained within Dynamics GP. But as quickly as things can change with the ACA, you can quickly find yourself behind on updates if an installation is required. In a hosted solution, you don't have to worry about that. Your provider is going to have those covered. You don't have to worry about installing an update, or if you're on a 2 or 3 versions back, you're just not going to have to worry about those things. And believe me, these things can change very quickly with the IRS. Another thing that should be included in a comprehensive solution is role-based security. That's just very important, just so you, especially when you get into things like submitting information to the IRS, you can have HR folks running reports to determine who's eligible. When it comes to that submission process, you want that to be pretty secure. All right, a comprehensive solution, and if you're thinking, wow, is he going to show us a comprehensive solution? The answer is yes. Of course, I'm going to show you a comprehensive solution here in just a few minutes. But I want you to think about, especially if you utilize spreadsheets or Dynamics GP in the past, it might be, well, this is really, you might be thinking this is a pretty good way to do it. And what I want to do here is start to bridge the gap between what you've done and what the possibilities are for how it could be done going forward. So I'm underscoring these characteristics related to a comprehensive solution. Penalty risk management. This is really your activities throughout the year to keep you in compliance with that coverage mandate number 1. Constant monitoring of employee eligibility, accommodating breaks in service and administering the rule of parity for those breaks in service. Forecasting which variable hour employees are trending towards full-time status. Tracking of the offers of coverage. Continuous testing for affordability. This is going to keep you out of hot water with the IRS from a compliance perspective throughout the year. Those business intelligence tools and dashboards, those automatic software updates that come with a hosted solution, knowing that when the IRS makes changes, that your solution is going to be up to date automatically. When you get into year end, the reporting mandate, the 1095-C, knowing who should get that, populating 1095-C with correct ACA codes, and that's done programmatically. That's not just putting the codes that you've determined on the form. That's determining the codes and putting them on the form. So you would never have to do that again, or should never have to do that again. A comprehensive solution should support the monthly and look back eligibility measurement methods. Populate Part 3, which is covered individuals or dependents if you're self-insured. Supports employers with a pay strategy, meaning they didn't offer coverage, but they're still generating the forms to avoid that penalty. And at year end, distribute the 1095-Cs to your employees by printing them on blank paper, emailing them, or utilizing even a fulfillment service to have those distributed that way. The 1094-C should be generated out of the ACA system, should be able to e-file from within the ACA system. There's two methodologies for e-filing. One is downloading a file from your ACA system and submitting it through the IRS portal. It takes about 6 to 8 weeks for you to get clearance to do that, and it's a royal pain and wherever, and that alone will make you contribute to the swear jar. The other methodology is an ACA solution that has press button submission, so they've already got the credentialing taken care of and all that. It's just automatically sending over your 1094-Cs electronically to the IRS. Okay, that's the preferred method by far. In addition, the 1094-C the system should support 1094-Cs across multiple EINs that are affiliated or commonly controlled. All right, now that we've talked through all of that, let's take a look at how you can do it. All right, I'm going to start in a very familiar place for most of you, and that's Dynamics GP. And the ACA system that we provide lives outside of Dynamics GP. And we utilize that ACA system, or that ACA system is utilized by many different employers, or many employers that use different payroll systems. So if by chance you're using ADP, QuickBooks, Paychex, another payroll service, or anything like that to process your payroll, then you can certainly still utilize our ACA system. Our ACA system is dependent on payroll data only. Nothing from human resources in Dynamics GP, nothing from human resources in any other system. It utilizes the same data structure regardless of what payroll system you're using. I would assume that most of you are probably processing payroll through Dynamics GP. I'm going to show you how you make that payroll data available to the ACA system. So in Dynamics GP, I'm going to click on ACA Data Management. That's going to open up a window where I've created an export profile. And I'm super creative, so I name my export profile ACA. All right, that's a joke. You can laugh amongst yourselves if you wish. I've got the company ID here, so if you've got multiple EINs, no problem. You can select those multiple companies from regardless of which company you're logged into. And then you start to select the information you're going to send to the ACA system. That information is primarily going to consist of employee data, which is all going to come from Dynamics GP payroll, as well as payroll transaction data. So employees are pretty straightforward. It's name, SSN, employee ID, address, date of birth, date of hire, termination date if there is one, employment status, part-time or full-time, and so on. Transaction data is going to include pay code transactions, deduction transactions, and benefit transactions. And you can select the dates for which you want to push over to the ACA system, and you can also choose which codes you want to exclude. For example, under deductions, we really don't need 401k transactions for ACA compliance, so you can leave those out. But we will look at insurance deductions and insurance benefits primarily for the purpose of determining whether or not the employee is enrolled in one of the plans that you've offered. We're not doing anything, utilizing anything from benefit setup in Dynamics GP. We're going to handle that on the ACA side. We're not using any codes in Dynamics GP. The only thing that we might use, other than payroll data that we might use, is dependent information if you're self-insured. All right, so this information will come over to the ACA system, okay, and then we're going to look at configuration to show you what other components you'd need to add to that to make this all work together. So let's go over to the ACA Compliance and Reporting System. I'm just going to click on the link here. It's going to open in the browser. Okay, now I've already got data here, and I've already got the configuration done. It's also important to note or to point out that if I was just getting started under to-dos, you'll see a link for the implementation wizard, which is going to ask you 17 questions, or be 17 steps, asking for information that's going to do most of the configuration for you. While we're here, I'll mention just the alerts, and you'll see the dashboard information that's here, and you can configure this dashboard as well, but an alert's going to be there's an employee that just became eligible, there's an affordability concern for an employee. All of those things are going to help you stay in compliance and be proactive throughout the year. So whenever you run payroll and update the data, it's going to update those dashboards, and you can just take a quick look like, boy, there's something I need to take care of there. Okay. In addition, while we're here, you always have access to our ACA tutorials, our ACA user group lessons, which are just for our ACA customers. I call this ACA group therapy, where you can always ask questions, get insight on new rules, get insight on how to use the system, etc. If you miss that, you can watch the recording or at least download the PowerPoint. If you scroll down, you'll see blog posts put together by our support and compliance team. Okay, you'll see live links from the Integrity Data Twitter feed. So what's changed related to ACA? I think if we scroll down here, we'll see something related to today's webinar here for BMI. At least I thought I got retweeted, maybe not. All kinds of helpful information there, and of course contact information also. All right, let's take a look at some of the configuration items that would be populated under the implementation wizard. And I just want to show you how this is set up. So number one, to see how easy it is, and then when we start looking at reports here in just a minute, you'll see you'll know where those reports are coming from and the data involved. So first, let's set up the standard measurement period. Of course, this sets up your testing cycles for variable hour or part-time employees. So I've got one set up here, and this is set up basically on a calendar year plan year. Okay, so the stability period coincides with your plan year. In this case, all that coincides with the calendar year. So if your plan year begins in July, for example, then you can certainly set this up to be 7/1 to 6/30 and so on, and backfill from there. So from here, the administrative period is 3 months prior. You could set it to 2 months. You can set these to be whichever. This is sort of a typical configuration. 3 months prior, so 10/1 to 12/31. And then the look-back measurement period, or the standard measurement period as it's called, is running 12 months prior to that, so 10/1 to 9/30. So this is going to drive the reports that we're going to take a look at in just a few minutes. So for variable hour employees, we're going to use these testing periods. For newly hired employees that are part-time, they will go through an initial measurement period. Full-time employees will go through a waiting period, and I'll show you where that's set in just a moment. So we've got a 12-month initial measurement period, 1-month administrative period, and 12-month stability period. So we don't have to make an eligibility determination for part-time employees until they complete 12 months of service. I'll show you some forecasting around this that comes in handy. I'll also show you a report that just shows you which employees have completed this. And then if they do pass the test and are designated as full-time, then you need to offer them coverage for the next 12 months. All right, let's take a look at the company setup. This will be done for each of your EINs. So if you have multiple EINs, you just set up a company for each one of those. I've got one here, of course, called Fabricam. Got the company information at the top. I've got my current standard measurement period, previous standard measurement period, default control group. A control group is really just a reporting function. It's a way to group EINs together to show up on reports. The eligibility method that we're using for variable hour employees, the monthly measurement or the look-back measurement. We have the look-back measurement method selected. My current lowest cost plan, poverty line information, some options around if that lowest cost plan is available to everyone. In my electronic masking the SSN on the e-filing that I'm doing? Do I require waivers if an employee declines the coverage that we offer? And that's optional, and there is a place within the system that you can track those waivers and set up waiver reasons. And then on the 1095Cs, do I just want to print those for eligible employees, or do I want to print one for all the active employees? And I have this opened up just so we can look at a couple different examples when we get to that point. Here's your full-time eligibility waiting period, number of months, number of days, start of the month, etc. I've just got mine set to 60 days. Now that's also driving some alerts on the dashboard because there's some employees that have higher dates, and so they're coming up on that 60 days and the system is alerting me to say, hey, you need to offer coverage to these employees because they are at the end of their waiting period. We have some other options as well below related to how to handle hours for eligibility and also seasonal employees. All right, once your data comes over from Dynamics GP, and if you're not using Dynamics GP for payroll, if you're using a different payroll system, under utilities and maintenance, there's an upload component where you can bring in data from Excel, and the system will validate that data and bring it into the system. So that's very easy to do also. And we have about 40% of the employers using this ACA system go through that process. But once that data comes in, the system will recognize deductions and benefits that are included in those payroll transactions that we talked about. And so when I come over to the ACA Plan Window, here are the insurance plans that I'm offering to the employees. And what we're doing here is assigning ACA-related attributes to them. So for example, if we look at this plan for 2016, is this a qualifying offer, yes or no? Is it providing minimum essential coverage and minimum value? Who is it covering? What's the start and end date? What safe harbor are we using for affordability calculations? Is this a least cost plan? Is it a self-insured plan? What's the employee's self-only cost of coverage? That's going to populate line 15 of the 1095C, and then the percentage used for affordability. So what's happening is that based on that payroll transaction data, the system is understanding eligibility. And we're going to look at some eligibility reports here next. So it knows when an employee becomes eligible. And it assumes that you're offering, at a minimum, your least cost plan to that employee at the point that they become eligible. But it can also know whether or not the employee is enrolled in one of the plans that you're offering based on that payroll transaction data that we talked about. So you're already running payroll, right? And the nice part about this is that there's no additional steps for you related to ACA. You're processing payroll and you're taking that information and the system's doing the rest of the work for you. So what the system will do is say, hey, we know this employee is eligible, you offered him coverage, takes the attributes from the least cost plan, puts those codes on the 1095C, looks to check or checks to see if the employee is enrolled in the plan. If so, and if it needs to utilize any of those attributes, it will. Otherwise, it'll at least put a 2C on line 16 of the 1095C. And the reality is you're done with ACA compliance for that particular employee. You don't have to touch each individual employee. The system's going to do that during the year-end process. All right, let's talk about, just want to explain that while we're here, because that's usually kind of the area where people are like, well, how does it do that? And that's really how it does it. So now that we've got the data here, the payroll data, we've got the configuration done, which will go very quickly through the implementation wizard. Now let's jump into some reports that you can utilize throughout the year. If you look at the dashboard, it's going to tell you, hey, there's some alerts, there's some new employees that are eligible. There's a dashboard here for number of employees that are completed their initial measurement period. Those will be part-time. And some other information also that are backed up by detailed reports. When we go into the reports themselves, let's start by looking at new part-time employees, because those are ones that can sneak up on you and become eligible and you not even know it. Okay, we're going to run a report called Initial Measurement Period Analysis. I'm going to change the date here. So this report will come up on the screen. These reports can be printed, obviously. They can be downloaded as PDFs. You can export them to Excel and do some filtering if it's a large report for your organization. But what you see here is really a forecast. So these are new part-time employees that are currently within their initial measurement period. You don't have to make an eligibility determination on them until they complete 12 months of service. But from a cost perspective, you might want to know how many of them are trending towards full-time status, because if they get there, you've got to offer them coverage, and that can be expensive. So what this is doing is showing us, based on their average hours of service per month, where they stand. So I like to pick the easy examples. Harley Carson, 1 month, 135.75 hours. Obviously, if his average is more than 130 hours of service per month, it's going to forecast him to be full-time. Well, we know that the average is 135.75 in that month, so it's got him forecasted at full-time. This is a feature that is not available in any other ACA system that I've heard about or discussed with anyone. So this is unique to what integrity data can provide. And this is important, especially if you have a large number of variable hour employees. On the contrary, Alex has 104 hours of service in that 1 month, and so of course it forecasts him at part-time. So you can look down the list here, and there's some employees with 6 months of service. Some are forecasting as part-time, some are forecasting as full-time. Here's an employee with 10 months of service, pretty safely in the part-time category. But again, this gives you some insight as to where they're headed. So if you've got too many employees that are forecasting towards full-time, you've got time to make schedule changes or whatever to impact their hours of service and not have to offer them coverage. And that's just managing the process. If you look below, of our 29 employees that are new and part-time, 13 of them are trending towards a full-time status. Right now, at some point, these employees are going to hit the end of their initial measurement period. They'll hit 12 months, and you've got to make a determination of whether or not you need to offer them coverage. That's going to show up on your dashboard. Okay, behind that dashboard is going to be a detailed report. That's going to be the monthly initial measurement eligibility report. I'm going to change the date to match up with the one we just looked at. Okay, so we've got 2 employees that are showing up on this report. So 2 employees completed their initial measurement period at the end of August. So now we've got to make a determination of whether or not we need to offer them coverage. The system is telling us that both employees test out as part-time, so we don't have to offer them coverage. It's a good time to reflect and think about how you've been doing this, or maybe you haven't been doing it at all, and think about how easy that was for me just to quickly run that report. And again, you're not having to do a lot of work to get to that point. You're processing payroll, making that data available. You did the configuration, which probably take you about 30 minutes to complete that process. But now you're able to utilize this throughout the year to keep yourself on track. Think about those that you report to, maybe the CFO, or maybe you are the CFO, and the comfort level in knowing that, hey, we're on top of this throughout the year. Our risk for penalties is now very low because we're staying on top of it and tracking it throughout the year. All right, now when we get to the end of the year, oops, let me go back to reports here. When you get to the end of the year, you've got to test all part-time employees to determine over the look-back measurement period, which is 12 months, are there any of those employees that test out as full-time? Did any of those part-time employees average more than 130 hours per month over the course of that look-back period? So we're going to run a report called the Standard Measurement Period Analysis Report. And it's going to tell us exactly who we need to offer coverage to. Now this report, if it gets lengthy on you, so if you've got hundreds of part-time employees that are that you need to filter through, what you can do with this report is export it to Excel and filter it down so that it will show you exactly who is full-time. All right, so let's take a look at this example. So I kind of always pick on Birdie. Birdie is a part-time employee, 1,667.4 hours of service. That is, Birdie's average is more than 30 hours per week and more than 130 hours per month. So what Birdie will need to offer, so Birdie tests out as a full-time employee, which means you've got to offer Birdie coverage going into the next stability period. Okay, so very quickly, the system is telling you, out of all the variable hour employees that you have, these are the ones you need to offer coverage to. If you want to send this out to Excel, it's, in case you're curious, it's 9 clicks to get it filtered down. Okay, so send it out to Excel, turn on the data filters, just show me the full-time employees, and you've got a condensed list, and you're on your way to making sure that you offer those employees coverage. And again, that's very important from a compliance perspective. All right, I'm going to have to pick up my pace here a little bit so I don't run out of time. So now that you've offered coverage to everybody and you're all compliant there, let's talk about the year-end status, or the year-end process. The year-end process will soon be wizard-driven as well. So I'm going to show you kind of the old-fashioned way. You know, it's really like 3 steps. The first thing that you do is you run the year-end and close process. That takes about 4 minutes. You do it for the specified year and company, okay, and it'll produce a file that's then used to print the 1095-Cs. So let's go ahead and take a look at those 1095-Cs. And I want you to keep in mind that I'm being 100% honest with you. In this database, I have not touched any of these employees from an ACA perspective. But what's going to happen is it's going to print all the necessary 1095-C forms. Now you'll see in the lower right-hand corner, there's 326 employees within this database. It's going to print 112 1095-Cs. We're not going to look at 112 of them. We'll look at 2 or 3. But I'm going to print those. But the system is determining who should get a 1095-C, and it's putting all the codes on those 1095-Cs for us based on what we've done in this webinar, sending the data over from the payroll system, doing the configuration, setting up the rules for it, and that's it. Okay, so you'll see the 1095-Cs come up on the screen. From here, you can print them directly to the printer. There's an emailing option, and we will be releasing some fulfillment services options as well, so you can have a third party print those 1095-Cs, put them in envelopes, and then mail them out to your employees for you. So here's a 1095-C. It's got the codes on it, the 1C, $90, and the line 16 is a 2G, meaning they did not enroll in the coverage that we offered, but it is affordable under the Federal Poverty Line Safe Harbor. If we look at a couple of other ones, for employees that were not full-time, and this is interesting just because we can look at their data, and sometimes I really am an advocate of just keeping these on file, so if an employee asks, well, you were not offered coverage, that's 1H, because of 2B, you were not a full-time employee throughout the year, okay? That's what that data is telling us. Now, you probably went through and had to put all these, figure out these codes month by month, and had to put them on, number 1, try to figure out what the codes mean, and then 2, put them on the forms. This employee is a 1H also, 2A, not employed, 2D, non-assessment period through the rest of the year. And if we would scroll through, we'd see a lot of other 1Cs on line 14, 90, 2Cs and 2Gs on line 16. Again, system's doing all of that for us. Once you've produced the 1095-C, you can also produce the 1094-C as well. If you need to e-file, I'm going to show you how you do that. You go down to IRS filing, select the year and the company. This is the file that's created as part of the year-end process. Click Send to IRS. It confirms it will go to the IRS. So I'm not going to do that in this example. But then once it goes to the IRS, I heard from a lot of employers in June that said, well, my ACA vendor said they submitted to the IRS, but I haven't heard anything for a couple of weeks and I'm a little bit scared. Well, that doesn't happen with this solution, because what you can immediately do is go down to the IRS filing activity, and it's going to tell you exactly what's going on with that e-file submission to the Internal Revenue Service. Of course, my status is not started because I didn't. if you did, it would say pending, accepted, rejected. As soon as it's accepted by the IRS, you would have a reference ID, and then if you do need to make corrections, you can certainly do that, and it will tell you the status of each individual 1095-C, or if there's an error, what that error would be. For example, SSN doesn't match or something like that. In addition, as you prepare for subsequent years, if you want to download the data package associated with the year-end filing, you can certainly do that. In addition, just from a usability perspective, you can manage your users. You can set up audit logs to understand who made changes when and where. Utilize a usage report, set up role-based security, and this clear data option is just to really, if you wish, to start over. That's really more used for employers that maybe had a problem with their data, or doing some testing and then cleared out to start over fresh with live data. So, or if you're a demo person and want to refresh your demonstration data. All right, so what we've done is we've pulled the data over from payroll and Dynamics GP. No additional steps in Dynamics GP related to ACA. Bring that data over. We showed you what you had to do from a configuration point of view. From there, you're staying compliant throughout the year, quickly running the year-end process, printing the forms and the e-filing, and able to do that very quickly and very efficiently. Let's go ahead and go back to the PowerPoint. Talk about some recently added features: role-based security, multi-tenant user support and account management, audit logs, the configurable dashboard, the configuration wizard, fulfillment options, a 1095-C preview capability that lets you see that throughout the year. We'll make sure everything's going smoothly. That's a good risk management tool. So we're putting a lot of optimization components and features into the ACA system to help you really streamline that process as it relates to ACA management. Why customers switch to us? You're not required to manually update each employee. Reliability, less manual processes, excellent support, our ACA group therapy that we talked about, no dependence on Dynamics GPHR. Everything's very transparent. I think another reason is our system is I call it a one-way street. Data comes over from payroll to the ACA system. You do everything related to ACA. It does not push anything back to Dynamics GP. I've heard some bad stories about it updating benefit start dates and things like that. In Dynamics GP, our system does not push anything back to Dynamics GP. And of course, the value that it provides exceeds the cost incurred from the software, and that's obviously the business case behind the ACA solution that we provide. And this is a goal: learn, or to have a system that's simple to learn and very efficient, very quick and easy to use, and produce a positive experience for you. All right, I think that's about the end of the slides. Just quick next steps. If you need a quote or anything like that, you can certainly reach out to InterDyn BMI. They'll probably be following up with you for questions. You can always reach out to us directly or follow up on our website at integrity-data.com/ACA. Let me just advance to the next slides there. I'd be more than happy to answer questions. And in the meantime, I'll put up my contact information here. Certainly you can reach out to me as well if you have additional questions. Obviously the folks at InterDyn BMI have a great payroll team and a great account managers, so they can obviously answer some of these questions also. But we're more than happy to help and to help you through this process in 2016.
You had to say that, so I'd compliment you one more time, Dan. All right. We do know each other way too much. All right, everybody. So on the right-hand side, let's type in what questions that you have so that we can make sure we can get some answers before we let Dan go. Here is the first one. What if we use a monthly measurement period and we have a part-time employee who's worked 140 hours in February 2016 and met 1 month of eligibility of the second month required waiting period? Then the employee worked 140 hours 4 months later and now has met 2 months eligibility waiting period and would have to be offered coverage. Will the software pick up this employee has now and met the 2 months of eligibility period and needs to be offered covered?
Yeah, so with the monthly measurement method, what the monthly measurement states is that if the employee works or has 130 hours of service in any given month, then you need to offer that employee coverage. Now, the coverage that you offer to that employee only has to be offered for 3 months. So, for example, you've got 1 month to get that offer of coverage out to the employee, and then that offer would need to be out there for 3 months. And at that point, if the employee does not work 130 hours in a subsequent month, you can withdraw that coverage. So you get into a situation where an employee could work 1 month, 140 hours. You would need to offer that employee coverage simply based on that 1 month and 140 hours. If the employee doesn't enroll, and that employee's hours could fall off at that, they could work 10 hours the next 3 months, but you still have to offer them that coverage. And then subsequently, a few months later, you can not offer them coverage anymore. Which gets into the reason why most employers with part-time employees don't use that monthly measurement method, because it's a back and forth. Put yourself in that employee's shoes where you get offered coverage, and you don't know the rules of ACA. You get offered coverage, like, oh great, I've got coverage, and then a few months later you don't have that coverage anymore because your hours slipped, and maybe you were down to 120 hours. And that's why, the look-back measurement method works a little bit better because it's more consistent for the employer as well as for the employee. Just in that example, that's an administrative situation where it's a lot of work. Now, getting to the answer to answer your question, the system will support that and will provide those reports to say, hey, this employee is eligible for coverage because they've worked 130 hours in a month. And then there are alerts in the system. One of the alerts that's sitting there now is there's a variable hour employee that is covered but may no longer be eligible. So the system's going to help you be proactive in that, even if you are using that monthly measurement method. But I guess my advice would be take a look at that look-back measurement method, because that might be a little bit easier for you. But there's also some good reasons for using the monthly measurement method also.
Wow, that's complicated. All right.
Yeah.
Of course it is. It's government, right? All right. Okay, I don't see any other questions in the queue. And again, this is one solution that we highly recommend, and our team can talk to you a little bit further and then have that private conversation with someone from Integrity Data, and maybe Dan too, so that we can see if we can meet your needs. So just reach out to one of us, or you see Dan's information here. Let them know that you're a BMI client and we'll work together. Dan, last words of advice?
Yeah, I was just going to say, certainly there's, I know we're getting towards year end. I just had a customer come to me again today that says, hey, is it too late to get this going? And absolutely not. The implementation can happen very quickly through the wizard and through the bringing the data over from Dynamics GP. So don't be concerned if you're thinking, well, maybe it's too late to get this going. It's absolutely not. There's urgency, but you've got time. And so, and again, I want to say thanks for the opportunity to talk with you all today. Thank you, Kim, for arranging this and for everything else that you do as well.
You bet. And thank you, Dan, so much. As always, great job. And for everybody else, keep an eye